we would do, I don't know if summer, were we gonna be able to, change our agenda order to accommodate, release request? Or I guess that's a good-
So yeah, there has been a request to reorder the agenda such that the regular item could proceed as one of the first items due to some other scheduling conflicts. So if the committee wants to consider and is okay with that, I think Chair Vars, you could make that call and just announce that that'll be reorganized
Okay.
for the
or
record.
Start with a roll call. James Oku. Here. Natalie Sayre.
She called me, she's coming.
Present yet. John Vars is present. Peter Murphy.
Here.
Brian Casey. Here. Jonathan Winslow. Here. Lauren Silverman. Also, and then we got several vacant positions. San Mateo County Agricultural Commissioner.
Or here.
Morgan Miller is here. Farm Bureau Executive Director, Jess Brown. Here today.
He said that.
Yeah, he would probably do that. And then Lauren Silverman.
Made it. Got stuck in a crash at Singer Bridge. Yeah. Hopefully not the only one.
Oh, yeah, excuse me. So UC Co-op Extension Director. Representative.
That would be me. I do.
And then San Mateo County Planning Liaison, Summer Burleson.
Here.
Well, we had a request from Carrie, who's presenting our only regular agenda item. To put that at the beginning so that she would be able to participate in that Farm Bureau event happening.
Make a motion to do that.
You support that, Peter?
Second motion.
Go ahead, Carrie, you're up.
Yeah, to mark the motion.
You're up. Yeah, you can.
Lauren. Yeah, I'm just getting my notes up, so. Well. So we have. Motion by Peter. Agenda item 2 top. Okay, let's do a roll call vote, except I don't have the minutes in front of me yet, so thank you, Gary. Okay, James.
Here.
Yes, okay, is that everything?
She's on her way.
Okay. John,
Yes.
Peter,
Here, yes.
Ryan.
Here.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Lauren, and I vote yes. Got our fellow vacancies, so unanimous taxes.
Yeah, should we just read into the record, the regular agenda item number 7? Owner Joshua Skolnick, applicant Carrie Burke, file number PLN 2022-00211. Location west side of Cabrillo Highway, Pescadero, APM numbers 086-250-140, 086-250-150, and 086-250-160, all neatly in a row there, numbers apart. Consideration of a coastal development permit, CDP, planned agricultural district, PAD permit, and agricultural review for the drilling of a test domestic well on an undeveloped 6.53 acre property located on the west side of Rio Highway in the unincorporated Pescadero area of San Mateo County. The CDP is appealable to the California Coastal Commission. The property is located in the Cabrillo Highway State Scenic Corridor. Action requests that the AAC provide a recommendation to the planning commission on the proposed project.
Thanks, John.
I make a motion to pass.
We have to
It's a legal
discuss.
parcel.
I'll make a quick
Okay.
introduction to the project, and thank you to the committee. I wouldn't make the special request, but tonight's event isn't agricultural related event. And typically it's held on the third Monday of June, but for some reason it's on the second, and so we have this bit of a conflict. But this is a legal parcel that was created and with a recorded map back in June 1966, 6.5 acres. So this was before the Coastal Act, before the PAD, when we had zoning of A1 that was typically 1 acre zoning. So it kind of set up that we have these smaller parcels, as many of you know, that are familiar with Pescadero on the west-hand side. At this point in time, that there's these smaller parcels that have been subdivided, many of them with single family homes. The request is to, which you need is for a domestic well or test well, anything on the west side of Highway 1 requires a coastal development permit to ensure that the coastal regions are protected. And this is just for a test well. If there is not adequate water found, then the potential buyer is going to go away and not be able to utilize the land. The Skolnick family has owned it since the late 60s. And it was they never had it in ag use, so they've told me that they haven't had it in their ownership in agricultural use. There are 2 old wells, very shallow wells, but the 10-inch wells on the site that really are poor producing wells, and so we are going to be proposing to drill wells to current development standards that meet all of the setbacks. And this parcel is a little bit unusual. We've already had the biologists out there, but with some of the different plant varieties and there is a bit of sedge and wetlands there. So only the southeast corner of the parcel is actually going to be usable for any future development. It will, and of course, under the local coastal plan policies, they want to cluster your development anyway. You might, many of you know about the big house that's out on the cliff just to the south of them, but any new development, really, the Coastal Commission, the county are trying to have things away from the bluffs for sea rise and other considerations, and 2, it leaves the majority parcel either open for agriculture, or in this case where Mother Nature's kind of taken over with some sensitive habitats. Really it's just for the test well. And if they're successful, then at some point in time, they would come forward with a request for single family residence and also any appropriate other ag use that could potentially be supported, but they don't have a lot of land available that, given these other constraints. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. And
I asked you, just to verify, even though it was 3 separate APMs, it's still 1 parcel, right?
yes,
How'd that?
APNs are by taxing entity that's used by the tax assessor. What really counts is a recorded map. So here's your recorded map. Here's another, so right here, if you know how to read these, here's your APN map. It says parcel 3, which this is parcel 3, but you see these little corners?
Yeah.
Some property owners think that and they had different family members and they thought about, which they are in the record, they were going to try to re-subdivide. But one, water is always an issue on the west side in this area. And two, of course, in the zoning change. And now we have in the PAD, a minimum parcel size range of 40 to 160. Because we're thinking in different terms than they did back when there were not that many rules. Yes.
Why is it limited to that one corner?
Well, they had a biological assessment and we have,
Yeah, it's the corner in the red.
this is the southeast corner is the one that's gonna be available because you have, even though there's just plants, there's a bit of drainage here, probably from Highway 1. But what unfortunately, it's now compromised what they can do because you have,
I think DJ just that parcel.
well, not recently, it's been, it looks like, it's pretty wild.
We used to maintain it, I went out there and cleaned it within a year.
Because if it wasn't, it's by that house that you turn right off the driveway there.
It's where the fishing always park across from the old pea field that Joe had.
It's a
Right
little
next to
tiny-
Davis.
There's a little
Yeah.
tiny
The one
entrance.
outside.
Yes.
Another- You can see, but you're from Highway 1, there's there's this, because you've got, right about here is,
Joe Cook.
there's a nursery of, Glasgow, and then, these three, you have that little driveway, then you've got that big,
I'm thinking about the parcel.
yeah, there's a little driveway. And these three parcels.
It's.
Here, I started to try to read through this, and it's 220 pages long.
Yes, I
The
know.
majority
Love
of that is the biologist report, right? That's where almost all of this. for
Yeah,
you.
because this is really for the, was because in a bunch, we like when there's a potential for biological concerns, it's always really important to me to have that report up front. Otherwise, and also is really critical because we have setback just to where the wells can go and where the mitigation measures for that to minimize, the driveway going in and, just to really have the lightest footprint possible.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and this way, a potential buyer knows what they're getting into. because
Yes.
It's all been done already.
well, I mean, they're,
I'm gonna be able to go over there.
yeah, I mean, it's, the mitigation is pretty substantial in this area to do your pre-construction surveys, through your exclusionary fencing, to ensure that while the drilling is taking place, except any progress made,
I used to see.
work is being, they hear some equipment, they're gonna get out of there. And, but these are important rules, even though our species on the coast side, we have local abundance, really why, that we had this endangered species act, because in the valley is where the populations were eliminated, but we actually are, you encounter them quite frequently, which is the good news, is that they are thriving in our area, but that also means that we have to be careful when we're building and follow those rules, and it takes more time and money to do these mitigation measures, but it is what's intended in order to allow the development to go forward.
So those reports weren't required yet, but they likely would have been in the future.
They will be,
Okay.
no, they will be for there's a negative declaration, so the applicant has done the reports with with their own consultants, but the county then publishes the report, there's a review period, but because just even though the well is a 4, foot square, and you have that road going in, but, that has the potential to, impact the environment, and so that's why we do these reports up front.
Yeah, I can help clarify. The project requires a coastal development permit, and so under the LCP, the local coastal program, which is the regulating set of policies for coastal development permits, there's some requirements related to sensitive habitats. And so, as Carrie mentioned, the project includes an initial study and mitigated negative declaration. And that's been prepared and circulated by staff already. And so as part of that, the biological study that was prepared for the project was needed in order to complete that environmental review aspect of it and to determine that the project complies with certain components of the local coastal program for the CDP.
Peter, make a motion to pass.
Second.
Peter, second for James. Okay, that's now I'm going here. Actually, I got it finally on my computer. Okay, so this is a motion to pass the project. Does that answer the action request for my recommendation to planning commission? Great,
Do they have
so that is the recommendation.
the two questions of compliance?
Just in terms of the wording of the motion. To recommend passing the project.
Recommend that.
Okay. James,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yeah.
John,
Yes.
Part of it.
Peter.
Yeah.
Ryan,
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Or and I vote yes.
Thank you.
Oh.
Unanimous pass?
You all-
Sorry, I got it mixed up. I go to another meeting at 7, that's why. Who's supposed to set up
Be on
the
your
hour?
toes.
Okay,
All right, Carrie.
I'm sorry.
That's it.
Thank you for getting the arm here. Because I know that we get-
Oh.
Yeah, help out.
Great. So. Have you done oral communications? yet?
Skip
Okay.
from member roll call. Item 7.
Okay, so do we skip back to oral communication? Number 3, oral communications to allow the public to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. If your subject is not on the agenda, the chair will recognize you at this.
Oh, Dante. Yes, please.
Sure. So back to the questions that we asked about the property that they've been purchasing from Post. Out there on the west side, the Portorio Ranches, which used to be the Pheasant Club property. These are the parcels that have the water share to Lake Lucerne. And a good portion of it has that WCD easement. But we found out that 3 of the parcels do not have this WCD easement. One has a house, it had a second home, but early days of Post, they tore down the house and a couple of the barns. And this was before their farmland futures initiative. So the questions we've had, or I've had, is, this 11th hour discovery, I'll call it, that these 3 parcels do not have this WCD easement. Why has this property not been part of farmland futures and offered to a farmer all these years? And it sounds like there's still time that we're asking these questions, and really you should be asking the questions to Post. They are the landowner, so hopefully, I don't know how you guys feel, but if we can invite them to the meeting, or maybe, I know Mike is asking some questions, he might have the answer we're looking for. But again, what is the acreage of the 3? They still have the shares. What's the future of that property? Why wasn't it offered to a farmer, and maybe that's hopefully something that could still happen. It's just, in early days, when this first came up, and Peter probably remembers, the farmer next door asked about these properties, and we were all told way back when it was all under a WCB easement, and that easement prevents any tilling, farming of the land, only possibly some grazing, ranching. But yet, all these years, for 22 years, these properties still have rights to the Lake Lucerne Water Company. And these three particular parcels are outside of that WCB easement. So why were they held out by post for a reason? And again, maybe this just slipped through the cracks because their early days and their mission really wasn't farming, and then Farmland Futures came apart. They set up a lot of farmers, which is great. So, you know, is there a chance? And these are my questions I've had. And a few others.
Are you saying that those three parcels, they're within the 6,300 acres, but they're not the total of the 60? You're saying there's three parcels within there?
Yeah, so all the properties on the west side that we know, the old Musi lands that Vince sold to
Right.
Post.
Right.
Post put this WCB easement, Wildland Conservation Board, I believe it stands for Wildlife Conservation Board.
Thank you. And what's the acreage of those three parcels? But that's what.
So that is the question, one of the questions, and I'm sure we can look at those APMs, but we had asked it, Mike wrote down those questions. What's the acreage? What is the future? They still have water rights, and again, they're still owned by a private party, Post. This hasn't happened in the sale to Mid-Penn, which it sounds like maybe it's a couple years out. Is there a chance that those can still be, you know, put in farming, whether it's an operation out there like, you know, Root Down has with the animals, or it's a row crop operation? And the difference why I say that is because she's out there probably on all prime, but that property doesn't have the water because it's not part of the Lake Lucerne Water Company. But yet this property out there, these three parcels do. And that's one of my questions I've asked. Is there any way to expand and sell some of those shares that they're about to retire on that water company, just to keep the revenue generated so the cost of the operating doesn't go up to Peter, Musi, Shastos, and all the others? Once, you know, if Post or Mid-Penn retire their portion of that, those operating costs are going to.
What was it at the last meeting? What was the ending? Didn't we end with something that we were gonna do? Where we were gonna approach them or something, John, about this?
Yeah, I thought we were gonna maybe agendize this, but I don't know what and what.
Exactly.
form.
We should agendize it. We should like make a, if it's possible, make a motion to do that tonight.
And really invite the landowner. We're talking to Mid-Penn, but they're quite a ways out. It sounds like they have shouldn't have purchased, I guess is what they said, but they don't own it now. So, well, it's still in the hands of private ownership.
There is a sale that's imminent, but that does not include these parcels. Aren't they transferring ownership like any day now?
Clarity of that would be nice as
Okay.
well.
That's this week, I believe. It's this week, yes, and it's happening.
No, this is the house right above Shabasco's where Megan and Levi or actually they're vacating the house any day. We were there for the barbecue. Yeah. And there used to be two houses.
So I
Mom and Dad.
remember when Mike was here the other day, you had asked for some clarity around, well, when is, he did indicate that there were parts of Cloverdale Ranch that they weren't going to buy right away. But, you know, there was like kind of. Which is.
So maybe we still have some time here. That's why we need to ramp up and just, you know, put this to rest. They might say, yeah, great, slip through the cracks. Let's get a farmer or a rancher up there, or no. Post is going to take this out. But if you look at their farmland future initiatives, this is what it stands for. Why not get this one up and running? Yeah, and Kenny Marsh lived back there, Mark and Linda. There were two houses, but again, early days of Post, Jeff Powers and probably doing as he was told. They tore down the homes in Hidden Valley. They tore down where Peter farmed on the west side, the packing shed, the houses, the labor camp. They were just demoing stuff left and right. And we said, whoa. And again, now they're with their farmland futures and the mission. I mean, they've been bridges, barns, houses, farm labor, doing some really good stuff. And there's an opportunity to do more here before this goes to Mid-Penn.
I'll have to make a motion to agendize and invite the host here so we could ask them questions.
I'm also just had a question before we second that in case we need to change it. Logistically speaking, if we don't meet for another month. Can we make an impact in a month if the sale is imminent, like where, and how, and who would follow up, who would need to be, who would we want to invite to be part of the discussion? Make sure that they can join next month.
I think it needs to be post and mid-10, because those are the two main players. And Dante has brought this up before, also at Farm Bureau, and unfortunately, they weren't at the Farm Bureau meeting on Monday night. And yeah, this is very, you know, a pressing concern.
Yeah.
And I think we all learn a lot about how things proceed, but also, you know, we all get better over time. Hopefully, if we learn from the past and if we can catch something and
Yeah, early on.
improve upon it and ensure that that water resource can be utilized by, you know, farming interests, that would be great.
So we should also acknowledge who's gonna contact them. Is that correct? Especially since time is an issue or no?
Summer should be able to.
Okay, if she's.
I will contact them.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to second the motion and just add to agendize this on the next meeting and invite post and mid-10 to discuss.
And as much of a heads up as we can give them so they can come here with answers would be great.
Yeah.
Is there a specific, like a just a 2-sentence specific that we could say, or like, are you willing to sell those 3 parcels that are, you know, WCD or?
We'll look back up and say, okay, there was a reason why you held these 3 out.
Okay.
For what reason? What was the acreage? What was the plan? Are you still willing? You know, is this something that slipped through the cracks? Can this be part of Farmland Futures Initiative? Those would be
Okay.
questions.
Are you okay writing that up, my dear?
Yes,
Oh,
I was
gosh,
gonna say, I have
exactly
notes,
right.
I have
Yeah,
notes of the questions, so I'll email them to Summer, so
Yeah.
she can reach
So
out.
then
And
now
I
we
think
have to have
there's
the heads
maybe
up.
2 parts to it. One being these 3 specific parcels that have water rights, but then this other question of should the parcels that are using water rights up there dwindle, is there the opportunity to reallocate water rights to other parcels and write that in before the transfer of ownership.
Exactly, because historically you had a lot more farming on the west side that went to state parks, other properties like Custer, Will Tardini State Park. So you just don't have the farming, you don't have the acreage. We really see a day those lakes are going to dry up again because there's just so much water there. And then again, they've been paying Post for 20 years and all these shares and not using the water. But once if they retire these shares or mid-10, then the other farmers are going to have to pick up, you know, their operating costs are going to go up. But is there a way? I know there's a way, but it's a complicated but doable process. You know, to apply for other water rights, whatever that legal process is. But you've heard me to take that water to other farms and get more people off the creek. There's an opportunity to do some really good stuff here. Let's just say these forbearance agreements and some of the ponds, they dry up. And legally you can't pump out of that creek, and then you have, you know, 1,400 acre feet down the road of water just sitting there on idle. And that's where I brought up the stuff, the part about in this first part is, could there be some language in there on some type of utility easements later, you know, if that water line needs to be extended from one parcel to the other. I know this has been 20 years in the works, but I just, again, these things popped up at the 11th hour. We said, oh my God, these parcels aren't part of WCB. They might retire this. They have an opportunity to, you know, take it to these other farms. And you've heard me, whether it's you guys out there or it's Dee or it's all the way to R&R. Because right now, Post owns from the Tuscadero Post Office, contiguous land, all the way to Gazo's Creek. They touch Bean Hollow, Cloverdale, Highway 1, and look at the size of that. There's an opportunity to do some really good stuff here. So
Yeah,
hopefully invite them in here. We can get these answers and put it to rest.
and then not have to spend another 20 years fixing it after the fact with bureaucracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Mike tells you they're a public agency.
Yeah.
This is complicated.
Yeah.
Another question.
And then also with the Post did manage that water company for 20 years, so they have experience. And trying to get, which Dante has been spearheading this for a while now, trying to get some interest. Because then Mid-Penn is they're gonna have to get all up to speed, and it takes a while because it's a very specialized area of water rights and management that they might not have a lot of experience with, and so the time is so ripe and of the essence. And we've been trying to kind of get some answers, and unfortunately, you need players present.
One other thing I'll add is those 3 parcels, I haven't looked at the soil survey map. There's a chance maybe they're not prime soils, possibly that could be it, but again, or the ground, is fallow. But that's a historic practice, is letting your grounds go fallow, letting your soils rest, and things change. So it'd really be, going up there and pothole and seeing exactly what you have there today. So maybe it's not mapped fine soil, but that very well could come up. And again, I'll use Root Down as an example. She's not killing the land. She has a great operation and a great job out there, but there is some 100% prime out there, but she can't farm it. It doesn't have water, but she is a farm. Therefore, maybe these 3 parcels can be an operation like hers with the animals or other. I think there's something there that works.
Mid-Penn hasn't fully been able to explain what will happen to costs for the change, right? They insured us last month that their counter best interest, but that was verbal, right?
And then when Michael say that the host controls about 35% of the water rights, what Dr. was saying that they're paying into. And if they just let those go, 35% of the cost is going to be shared upon all the rest of the users. And the other thing too is would be interesting to ask, because like Dante said, if somebody surrendered their water rights or something, they could buy it. It's a land, or it could be bought some water rights from another farmer. They had one farmer like to sell a little bit, or wanted a little bit more.
So we have a motion on the table. We're ready to vote. Okay, so motion by Peter to agendize this the next meeting and invite folks to Mid-Penn to discuss and answer committee questions. Seconded by yours truly. James,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Lauren and I vote yes. Oh, unanimous pass. Okay. Yeah. Next up, number 4, committee member updates and or questions to allow committee members to share news and or concerns for items not on the agenda.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, good eye contact. Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up on last meeting. I had mentioned looking for somebody that can speak to the committee, and other farmers in the area might be interested in learning about Prop 19 and how that affects their farm for giving it to their children, inheritance and so forth, with the tax basis. Anyway, so Summer texted me or emailed me that she had been looking for somebody for my request. She wasn't able to find anybody. I think I found somebody, because it's interesting. Well, it's not interesting, but in this area, you can find half a dozen attorneys, but they don't understand the exemption for Prop 19 for the ag land, because Farm Bureau worked really hard to get that exemption on ag land parcels, which a lot of the attorneys don't understand that exception. However, I did actually, it was kind of weird. We were out to dinner and ran into, started talking to the table next to us, and the gentleman, this is what he does, and he does it in the valley. So he's really familiar with how that affects the ag land parcels. So I'm really excited because I might be able to, or he might be interested in talking. And so Summer, I would let you know about that and get you in touch with him if that's what you prefer. But I just want to let you know that I'm optimistic. I think I might have found somebody. If You go-
Sorry, I was on mute. I couldn't find the mute button. Yeah, that would be great. If the committee, is interested in, inviting that person to speak, I'm happy to, reach out if you have some contact information, on behalf of the committee. And, we may be able to get someone from the county tax collector's office, but, they're in the middle of budgets right now. And so, if they could find somebody, they had mentioned it wouldn't be probably for another month or two.
Yeah.
That's if they could find someone that is familiar enough to speak on that. So if
And
there are any other options, yeah, feel free to pass them over.
It's kind of his area of expertise, but obviously the assessor's office is too.
Did you find something that way?
Yeah, and
Why don't we invite that person?
okay, well, if that's okay with everybody, if they're interested, I just, it's just a really difficult area for, most attorneys in this area to understand. Because there's, obviously farmland.
Where's that attorney from?
He's from the Valley, I think he said Modesto.
Okay.
So, yeah, but that's what he does, and he like the attorneys that I've spoken to just for, inquiring about it, they know a lot about the exemptions, but not the ag property exemptions, and it's so,
Well, why don't we see if we can get them to do a presentation?
okay, is that okay with everybody? Okay, is that okay with you, Summer? And I'll give you his name, okay?
Yeah, if you could send that over, that'd be great. I'll reach out.
Thanks for helping coordinate that, Summer. So I have an update that's been coming for a long time. I'm back, but I was just driving up from Santa Cruz. I think I found a place. Hopefully gonna be signing a lease here soon, and we'll actually be moving, which is bittersweet. So I wanted to, I think what probably makes the most sense is maybe John and Summer, we can get an email chain going about what a transition would look like timing wise. I love to still be able to do the July and August meetings for making sure it's a warm handoff, as they say. And make sure I finally get that letter to you guys maybe the next meeting, so we can finalize it in August on the farm stand guidelines that we finished discussing 6 months ago, but then life got busy. So wanted to just put it out there and just figure out what I'm allowed to do with the transition. Like if I move in July, can I still do one more meeting in August, or really what that looks like? Want to make sure it's, by the Brown Act and all the things, and also smooth transition for the committee.
So
Gonna be missing you guys.
you go to Belton.
No, I don't. I finally gave up on trying to find something in the Bonnie June Felton area and just focused on getting down there. So my big pivot was, I realized in January, I either needed to up my budget or lower my standards, and I wasn't gonna do either of those things. So I went in with a roommate. So roommate and I we got a place right away. And I'm gonna be on the west side. West side. Yeah, so easy to shoot up the coast and, I don't know West Side very well. It's near the middle school. And knock on wood, I want to jinx anything, so we'll hopefully confirm next month, next meeting. But yeah, so whatever that needs to look like. Thank you. Gonna miss the ability to serve on this committee, but I'm sure I'll be coming back to San Mateo County at some point, and we'll definitely still be attending some meetings as we wrap up stuff that I've been involved in, whether I'm still a committee member or not. I think that's the one, but I've never lived down there, so I'm not super familiar. I will know a lot more in a couple months. But yeah, and I gotta figure out where all the South Coast farmers are at in the Santa Cruz farmers markets. Since I won't be driving up for the half of the day one anymore. As regularly.
We're at the west side.
One side, okay, good to know, thank you.
It's Saturdays or whatever.
Okay,
And then
sweet.
there's one by Echo Cove.
Okay.
And Cabrillo College, that's the one our brother lives in.
Yeah, I gotta figure out the rotation.
You could streamline, just get a CSA share.
Yes, I've been hijacking half my mom's CSA for ages, so I'm gonna have to, I think, get my own finally. But I know you guys, I think, are at the San Mateo County On Saturday, San Mateo County.
Yeah.
One or San Mateo, whatever it's called.
The College Center.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's that. So Summer, let me know how you wanna plan this out. Maybe we just plan on actually do a call sometime soon.
Yeah, that would be great. We can try to touch base maybe later this week.
I'm in between big consulting projects, so I.
Okay,
It's a good time catching.
and sorry to hear that,
Yeah.
but exciting for you. So congratulations.
Sweet, it's bittersweet. Hopefully I'll be back. I've only served one term, so I got 2 more terms I can come back to in the future. I'm still left here though. Anyway, thanks for all the support, guys.
Thank you.
Next item. Next item, consideration of, unless we have other
Yeah.
updates, sometimes Corin has something to share.
Yeah,
with
I don't
us.
have anything today. I wanted to get that. Right, around the agenda, so hopefully next time.
Good question, yeah. You had talked about putting something in place, the evacuation. thing.
Yeah, that's the, sorry.
Oh, that's it. okay.
Yeah, I wanted to put it on this agenda, but time slipped away and I didn't get it on. So I'll have to wait till next time. Next month, July meeting, to get it on the agenda to have a discussion about it.
Oh, and that reminds me, I guess I should make a comment, although I haven't prepared, but, the farm labor, commission is meeting
Farm.
bi-monthly for.
Oh, farm worker
Farm worker
advisory.
Advisory.
Not
Yeah.
coalition, different group.
Right?
Yeah. And I was reminded because one of the items that came up was someone from your department.
Yeah, yeah.
Presented on the Ag IG.
Yeah.
And I realized that I'm supposed to be acting as a liaison kind of between the 2 committees. So among, besides that, we also, had a presentation from, assistant to, the, the
Supervisor?
county supervisor, Fred
Ray.
Ray.
Supervisor
Not
not.
Fred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ray, and so discussing, the whole farm labor housing thing was part of it, and then there was like just a training, they're doing these trainings to get the committee up to speed on like how to hold meetings and so forth. And one thing I thought when a comment that came up in that was like, oh, it'd be nice if workers got hazard pay if they had to go back to a disaster area.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, who's gonna pay for that? But I thought, one thing that could be good if you are gonna allow people to get back into a place where there's a lot of smoke is to make sure that there's some kind of training for the
Yeah.
employer to like not only be able to provide the N95s, but actually have some other parameters for like how do you decide whether it's safe to work or not?
There was training.
Yeah.
Safety. Yes, there
There-
was.
Well, there's also, so AB 1103 passed in 2021 and it kind of, the bill sort of shrunk down into like livestock only.
Mhm.
And so in that bill, it has requirements for training. So anyone who gets a pass has to go to a training and then put on by the state fire marshal. Well,
Mhm.
the state fire marshal creates the curriculum. And then so other people can actually do the training. So we're kind of working on all those detailed parts of it. There's also other requirements that is managed, operators and owners and managerial employees are the only ones who can apply for that. So initially it was wider, like it could be any employee of a commercial agricultural operation, and then it shrunk down to just owners and operators and managerial employees.
Get the passes.
That can get the pass, yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that that is not ideal, like for operators. But so now there's another bill out, AB 1141.
But that other bill was only applying to livestock.
Only applies to
operations
livestock,
anyways,
yeah.
so.
So now AB 1141 is out there and it's basically following the same exact framework. Except that it's gonna allow for planted agriculture too. should it pass. So that's kind of where we're at right now with it.
And it would be that anyone returning to the job site would need to get the training, not just the employee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so there's allowances like within the penal code that allows like the people at the roadblocks to let people in under certain parameters. So this would just kind of make it a little bit streamlined, kind of, sort of, there's like media passes, have you ever heard
Yeah.
of a media pass? So it's kind of similar to that idea. So, it would just kind of help facilitate.
And this is just that this was AB 1141,
1141 is out right now.
and that's for any agriculture,
And
and that would allow, and that, does that mean owners, operators, and managers as the other one did, or does this for any employee? This is for
owners,
owners,
operators,
managers.
and
Okay,
managerial.
and that
employees.
has passed,
No, that 1141 has not passed yet.
okay, and so
Just
that's,
I'm really hoping it'll pass.
okay, I got this, okay. Yeah.
1103 passed in 2021,
Okay, and that's the
and that's
one
the
for
livestock
livestock.
only.
Okay, gotcha.
Mhm.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, so 1141, this will broaden it to planet agriculture.
When does that come up for vote?
I forget what the rules are, but they have to vote by a certain time, otherwise it goes to the next session. Sorry, I'm not very good at all the
That's okay.
legislation.
Well, thank you.
Not your
I'm
lane.
I'm
Yeah.
learning, but I don't quite understand it yet. Exactly. I think it's soon though. I think it's like by September, we would know if it, and then so it's like a 2-year session. So then if things that don't pass the first year can go on to the next year. Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, another quick question. The pop-up roadside stand thing that we deal with every year, it seems like it's really ramped up this year from oranges and melons and cherries and sampling on the side of the road and just, they're not on private property. I don't know what permits are required or what the process, but when they're just on the side of the road there and setting up shop and, traffic concerns, public health and safety, all the above. Legally, what's going on here? One of your employees was at a meeting, I think maybe last month, he said, call me direct, maybe that was Farm Bureau. I should have wrote down his number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeremy Wagner.
Yeah,
He's also the one that spoke at the Farm Worker Advisory Commission.
you must be hearing about this.
Oh, yeah. No, I gave an open invitation to Farm Bureau to keep bringing it up. There's not an easy answer for this one. It's very pervasive throughout the counties, state. It's just everywhere. There is an ordinance that doesn't allow for.
Yeah.
Sitting, in the roadway. So that's kind of the best avenue to go. But of course that would have our sheriffs would have to do that. So it's kind of a matter of resources.
So here's what I would suggest, is years ago, when the deputies were on it, and they're a customer today, they don't know, you think it's a great, oh my God, cherries, oranges, melons, is a letter, whether that came from your office or Farm Bureau or Ag Advisory or all the above, to the sheriff's office to educate the deputies, their employees, whether that's in their debriefing, say, hey, by the way, the 80 feet on the coast or whatever, this is not allowed. If you see them in a public roadway, this is not allowed. They're in private land, that's one thing, and really educate the deputies instead of every time one of us sees them out there, we're having to call, we shouldn't have to do that, but just a suggestion.
So that's the difference, is the fact that they're like the ones up by Skylon but they're not on the cemetery, they're actually right on the roadway there. There's,
Public roadway. within the
yeah,
rest.
it's a public
Yeah,
roadway,
there's
so
quite a few around.
it would be a Caltrans easement area, is where.
And then you have guys that are, roadside stands that are paying the bills and permitted and everything else, and that's, these.
Right, so
That's
that's,
it.
so that would be what would be written in the letter, would be the difference, tell me if I'm wrong, the difference between then these pop-up stands and public roadways and such, and versus the private property.
Well,
So-
mainly the ordinance, just educate the deputies.
With
Yeah,
a
legal
copy, with a
ways.
copy of the, of Edward orders, like, on
Right.
tape to our meeting.
What ordinance
Yeah.
is that? What is that?
Need you a copy of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me a copy.
Yeah, I got,
'Cause that would be
I
good.
forgot where I put mine, but Bob has it.
Because then having that in the letter then would.
Yes.
And then the lieutenant would educate the deputy.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think we also recently updated the farm stand ordinance in San Mateo County, or made recommendations around that last year, so it might go nicely with like, we just updated it, there's some new things that are allowed, but these unpermitted stand rules still aren't.
And,
Yeah, because they're not gonna care at all.
Can we recommend that there be like penalties for those guys when they get caught? So hopefully the police.
That would probably impact be in the ordinance, which it, I don't think is.
I mean, can we recommend that they make an amendment to it?
because what they're doing is they're just moving down the road 3 miles of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, well, and I worry that the guy is selling it.
Exactly, that's what I was just thinking.
Exactly. That is
You want to
definitely,
penalize the people that gave them the product and told them to do it.
Yeah, and they're driving out from the second post. Where you can grow melon cherries. I'll just buy it.
I mean, there are, for me, from my viewpoint, there are quarantine issues that come up. But they're kind of far and few, like honestly, if I see them in the produce boxes, I'm less concerned. But when I see a bed of oranges with leaves on them, I'm very concerned in the pest risk. So that gets me a bit more nervous, just having fruit flies in this county would not be good, so. Yeah, no, we do need to talk to the sheriffs, but again, it's kind of the resource issue, so.
I think that letter would go a long ways and it would trickle down to the
Yeah.
coastside substation, leave the lieutenant, educate.
And
That
then
would be
even
great.
just holding the line in certain areas, I feel like is probably a good compromise. In our agricultural areas versus like kind of on
Yeah,
the bay side where it's urban, there's less risk.
It's a coastal.
Yeah. No, it is everywhere though. It
Yeah, it's
really
on
is.
Woodside Road, by
Yeah.
Woodside. And,
Yeah.
Overnight.
But
and
it's
off of
very
92 at
bad
Crystal Springs.
up on 92.
They did it on
They
both
seem to
sides.
have established themselves. so
yeah,
much.
it's like the same
They probably
guys.
like fight over like the space or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's spots in Santa Cruz.
Do you overlap with the Santa Cruz County Ag Commissioner?
Yeah, so basically all the commissioners were in an association, but then even we're in a smaller group of regional commissioners that we meet once a month.
It was they just, move up and down the coast.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's
What's the-
something we discussed quite a bit in the commissioners. There were some allowances for allowing roadside vending, which I think has complicated this at the state level a few years back. But I still don't personally think they're allowed, but it's probably a matter of interpretation of the law, but I think it's like some jurisdictions can't make certain requirements. And so, I don't know, this would have to be looked at by an attorney to see. So it's kind of a little bit complicated.
So we can write a letter referencing that ordinance because your interpretation of it might not be correct.
Well, no, so I think it was like, I can't quote the actual bill, but it created some allowances for vending in the, like cities couldn't create programs that didn't allow vending I couldn't quite understand the bill and its purpose, but that like confused a lot of us commissioners and how we would regulate pop-up roadside stands. It's just complicated.
So if we as a committee wrote a letter to San Mateo County Sheriff
Yeah,
with the ordinance that doesn't allow for them to be there is.
well, they
is
can
it-
figure out whether or not they're
Okay,
in
so
the
just
right to enforce the ordinance. I don't see why
because
you wouldn't be
we
able
don't have to
enforce the
interpret
ordinance.
it, they would interpret it.
Yeah,
obviously. Okay. That's really good. Yeah, so, You wanna do one more thing before you leave?
I haven't finished the last letter, so I should not commit to any more. I owe you guys tons of minutes. I can't commit to any more writing. I gotta finish my homework. I gotta finish what's been assigned.
I would do it, but
Do
it's-
we,
yeah.
I mean, is this something that would be better to like agendize it?
Yeah, we
I
could
just don't
invite-
know if,
Invite a rep from the sheriff's office too. Discuss.
I mean, really, if it was even just an email from your office.
yeah, no, Jeremy is
That's a good
working
idea.
with them quite a bit. Because there is a permit that they have to have, like, all those people up there need to have a permit. Permit's only good for 6 months. And whether or not those people actually have the permit is quite, questionable. So there is a permit they need to have, and then, but then if they don't have it, then what, right?
It's more about the ordinance, what I see.
Yeah.
They're just setting up in the intersection where that bad accident was tonight. They set up right there. They set up along
Yeah.
Highway 1, Petro Road. It's a, public health and safety concern in many ways.
No, I agree. Yeah, so no, we are working with them, but it might help. I think we talked on last week with Jess
Yeah, we did.
about setting up,
And Bob
a
passed a
meeting,
copy of the ordinance. around.
yeah,
And
to
information
talk with
on
them.
how to get the permit too, maybe,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Sure, that information.
What is this permit?
Yeah,
It's like through,
Farmstead,
it's like,
temporary
it's a
farmstead.
temporary like permit. I don't know, Summer, do you know anything about it?
I feel like it's through.
That you could get and put one up anywhere.
It's not the farm stand one, it's a.
You probably can't, be-
No, I don't.
You could put it up on the side of a road.
can't,
I'll set
probably
up right
can't.
next to the guy.
Yeah.
Give me the permit.
But I wonder are these county roads or highways, like Highway 1 and 92? I'm just wondering, is it sheriff or CHP or both, or who would be
You just-
involved?
Sheriff's office.
The sheriff's office?
I think it's sheriff's office, but
Okay.
that's a good question. I don't know where the jurisdiction ends with that, but I would think sheriff. Cause it's our ordinance. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. But do you know like the temporary sales permits that the vendors get? Have you heard of that?
I haven't, the only thing I can think of is it maybe just the business license, like a temporary business license that goes to the county's business license board?
The
Yeah.
count-
I'm not sure. That's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah.
Um,
My deputy Jeremy Wagner, he knows, he's like studied it a bunch. Because when we had the MedFly quarantine here in 2017, we had to get the sheriffs involved in helping us enforce the quarantine. And during that time, so we did a lot of work at that point.
And he's a sheriff?
No, it's
He's
just
your
we-
deputy.
he's a deputy agricultural commissioner, Jeremy Wagner.
So he knows a lot about.
He
these
does,
temporary
yeah, I
permits.
could probably get him to come
Yeah,
to talk about it.
that would be good. So
Is
So
it on
they
the
just
agenda, I think?
pay a permit and they could just pop a stamp
I don't-
anywhere?
It's
I doubt
not
it's
that
that simple.
simple. It's not that simple, but it's kind of like, we were sort of looking at all the different angles
So
to,
I was kind of thinking, save money and property taxes and everything, just do that.
that's what those people are. all thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, do we want to
Yeah.
advertise this? Is there follow-up that you want to do maybe at all?
I think it'd be great, but up to you guys. I mean, I think it'd be good to know,
Yeah, what?
so,
Yeah,
I'd love to see it. It's like insulting to someone like that.
yeah.
Yeah, so
well,
then do we want to request a presentation from your deputy?
On the
On,
rules around
Yeah.
it.
Not that
Yeah.
your standby.
yeah.
Yeah, let me,
They're gonna
Do
put
you-
one on both sides.
let me see, 'cause maybe I could just do the ag ID now.
Yeah, that would save so much bureaucracy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say, once you discuss at
Okay.
future meeting, not agendas.
It'd be a long night.
That's a good idea.
You know, there's a lot going on here with this meeting.
Well, I realize I have one more update, if we're, since we're gonna discuss this at a future one. If we're ready. Jump off, okay, so you triggered this, John, actually talking about the farm worker commission, because we got an update from Supervisor Mueller at the Farm Worker Coalition meeting last Friday. Which I think had happened since then. Good news that, the county has been awarded a 5 million CERNA grant, housing grant from the state to develop new farm worker housing here in the Bay. Yeah, so the Stone Pine Road, so it's gonna happen at the parcel that had already been identified by the city for development for affordable housing and or farm worker housing. In Stone Pine Road area, they've been doing a lot of outreach to the local community. So the county has been working on helping get funding, particularly D3 office, getting funding to develop new farm worker housing. So it's very, very exciting that they won this grant from the state. This is going to help develop 45 modular units in total at the site. The first phase will be 28 units. 18 of those units will be earmarked for the families affected by the mushroom farm shooting, and should align and be available about around the year anniversary, which would align. So the county had committed a year of rent funding for those families, and this should line up with when that rent funding ends and transition them into long-term housing options. There are remaining 10 units available in the first phase will be open through application for anyone 80% and below the AMI level. I have all of these notes typed up, so if anyone's interested, I can send them along to the county. And then in the future, additional units will be added on. Something that's interesting about this program and the CERNA housing grant in particular is that it's really focused on creating pathways to ownership. So part of this program has to be support and for farm workers to actually own the units, not just rent. But in terms of the 18 earmarked for the families affected, those are going to be rent only. So it's going to be a mix of rent and own. And the county's exploring a lot of other programs to help with down payments from home ownership, to help with maintenance of the units and the costs around that. So there was a really good conversation in the coalition meeting last week. Some really good questions raised, particularly around the wear and tear of these modular units. Like, okay, it's great, they're quick, they're quick and they offer a quick solution, but are they going to cost more in the long term because of all the maintenance required? So they were looking into, they don't know what modular units will be used yet. They're looking to example properties like Newhouse Farm, like the Belmont Park program. And so early stages yet, but still exciting developments to get 45 new farm worker housing units on the coast.
The
in
units are
Half Moon Bay.
manufactured homes.
Yeah.
Like
Trailers,
like I
yeah,
have.
yeah, exactly.
they're Horrible.
Yeah, and so that's really been a lot of pushback from the community is like, again, this is a great quick solution to get people in homes right away,
Yeah.
but long-term they haven't held up.
We are also talking about a 555 Kelly
Yeah, so that's a different program, a different project.
or a story.
Yeah, so that's also gonna be around 40 new units with farm workers. It's a different project that's being spearheaded by all us and has gotten funding from different channels. So hopefully in the next couple of years, we're gonna have close to 100 new units for farm workers in Half Moon Bay, which will it's a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, but it'll help. It'll be better than nothing. So they're in early stages. This is about to come in front of the board of supervisors. This is the time for community to get involved and to get feedback and to help direct, where this can be going, but still exciting developments.
Can I ask a random question?
Yeah.
If all these farmers have housing on their property already, who has done the study of how many houses were actually short?
I think it actually, I don't know if it's who at the county is spearheading this, but in response to the shooting in January, Supervisor Mueller in particular has been whatever the action committee is within the county that I think has folks from county executive office and housing department, et cetera, are supposedly doing an inventory of farm worker housing in the county. I don't know if anyone has been contacted as part of that. I don't know what they've found so far, but I do know the county supposedly, not supposedly, is conducting an inventory to determine what actually exists. If they need, what state they're in and where the need is.
Because I asked you, because they're showing what 44 here, another 44 here, so is that our thinking, we need 90?
No, I think they
I
need
mean, do we
like
need more than that?
hundreds, we need hundreds.
And then
Yeah.
who monitors that these people are actually continuing farm laborers?
Yeah, so that's something that's come up in a lot of these discussions is you can be a farm worker when you get into the unit, that doesn't, and that's when the assessment point happens. If you move on to other work, that doesn't mean you necessarily lose the housing, but there will be, for this particular project, there will be an application process that will be managed by a board, some sort of a board at the county. And Supervisor Mueller emphasized that he will not be part of the application review committee since he is part of developing the program. So it's this particular project, which is all I can speak to right now, is still in early stages of development. So if you have strong feelings about how that program could be run or how the application could be run, speak up because you can absolutely influence. the
Well, I'm
process
just
at this
curious
point.
because isn't that what happened to Moonside? And if we've got all these new
It is exactly
strategies
what
in
happened.
place to keep monitoring them, why can't we take our new system and start monitoring what we already have in place and maybe accrue a couple more housing instead of building new?
Yeah, I think.
Because I don't think Moonside is fully farm labor is what they were supposed to be.
It's not.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did I say?
That was way for them.
Okay.
They got
Yeah.
funding that.
So I'm just
and then they
thinking
did what
if
they wanted.
that was good
And it
intentions,
hurt a lot of
great
people.
intentions,
Yeah.
but it's gotten out of control. And so now we've got all these new great intentions with crappy modular
Modular
homes
units,
coming
yeah.
in.
I mean-
And now it's just gonna cost more, but then who's gonna really monitor them?
Yeah, I mean, they're all run by different, each housing development is run by, all us is doing the 555 Kelly one. This one is gonna be county and city coalition, so there's not one board necessarily that monitors all of them. Each project has its own. But I can say we need a hell of a lot more than 90 units for farm workers on the coast, so. In my mind, and I'm just speaking as as a community member here, it's like as many units as we can develop for farm workers, the better.
Laura,
Yeah.
there is a study that was done, but unfortunately the study was trumped in as low honor income / on labor housing. And when this came up, when Mary Mueller was before he came in office, he brought up that it's a fictitious study because it didn't pinpoint the farm housing. And we discussed the same type of thing with farm growth in the last several months, and one of the things is we also feel that the new move grid is intended to be there's two different building, one section plan and another time. One time it's supposed to be all part of their housing, but it's supposed to be a certain percentage,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have what it intended for. And also we talked about like Bayside Nursery and all that there used to employ 2,200 people. They're no longer in business.
Yeah.
Now the music's no longer in business. We used to farm up to 500 acres, we farm 20 acres. So what we're saying is that a lot of the farms and farmers find rapidly that they're not looking at, that we don't employ, we used to employ. And where they're just running with this, that we need all this farm labor housing, where we discuss this farm bill, we don't do that as such. And we just decided to that level. And meaning, but I agree with what you're saying, and it's rather than just going rapid, it really should be looked into what would be first, because as agriculture is rapidly in the farms, training the farm labor is they think it is. And so the other thing too that I was wondering is about the shooting and stuff is because after the shooting, workers came to the market, there anything done, far as, the people that, people for protection, shot people, but were involved in the shooter?
I
Or
don't
is that
know,
just
I'd
swept
say that
under the
that'd be a
carpet?
question for investigators, I certainly cannot speak to that. All I'm doing is relaying information that was reported from the P3's office, so I think these are really, really, really important questions. And I really encourage you to contact the P3's office with these questions, either through email or otherwise, their staff they've really been spearheading this project, so, and they really need community feedback from people who are living it, not just,
And
with good intentions on the sidelines.
And one other thing too is when you, we went to this big doctor's attitude for farm workers, at the farm. Scenario, I think they're elaborating this a little bit better, is like the CSA 11 is limited and it could be opened up so there could be more housing and all this here and that would help and all that there. So,
Yeah.
In our water down there, that's always the issue, is water, as Carrie
Yeah.
brought up as well. I'll be back. Like, great, both these programs are great. I know Pescadero, there's something in the works down there and a few others, and there's a need. My concern is exactly, Moon Ridge, that once you're in those 2 blocks of 80, and I'll use as an example, years back, a guy came to work for me at the ranch, and he was way overqualified for what that job paid. I said, what are you doing here? 2 weeks, he got that check that said ranch. He qualified at Moon Ridge and he's been there ever since. And he's a head maintenance guy at a place that has nothing to do with ag.
Oh,
So my
interesting.
point
Yeah.
is,
That's
is
what
this
it
gonna,
is.
history gonna repeat itself? We're gonna be right back here saying, we need farm worker housing. And I more power to anybody because it's hard work and, ag wears and tears on you. And it might just be a stepping stone for you guys, but when you agree to these terms to put in farm labor housing, somebody should hold you to that.
Yeah.
And that's where we're gonna need some type of oversight on this, or we're gonna be right back here again. Thank you.
Yeah, there should be some sort of oversight in our situation, we only have 3 full-time employees, 2 now. Anyway, the one guy that's been with us for about 26 years, great kid. No longer a kid.
Yeah.
But
Spiritually.
absolutely, excellent, very, very good. Anyway, him and the other guy, they couldn't get into Moon Ridge. They were on a wait list for years and years and years because there were people in there people they knew that worked at like Popeyes when it was here, the little, which is now Dunkin' Donuts,
Oh,
things
yeah.
like that. It's because, that I think a recommendation from AAC to Mueller's office saying something along the lines that there has to be some accountability so that we aren't right back where we were, because that's huge, number one. Number two, I just want to say for the record that the Joe Cerna grant, ideally, if they just for the record, it's not like any of us can do anything now, but I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Is ideally, wouldn't it be nice if instead of that going to these big developmental corporations that can, yes, they can do all this right now, but then it's gone. Instead, if those grants can be given to the farmers to actually build housing units on their property or have these modular homes on their property, because a lot of the farms, specifically the ones in Pescadero, are too far away from these housing units for the people that live there to benefit and work at those farms if it's too far. B, farmers don't pursue farm labor housing because it's too expensive to do all the things that you need to do to put a house that's been there for 30 years and put it up to code that's necessary for farm labor housing. There needs to be a grant to be able to do that. So we specifically don't have farm labor housing because our houses are so old that it would cost too much money to do that. Whereas it would certainly be a nice thing to do to be able to do that for employees. So I think a lot of farmers are under that because when they're generational farmers, those houses have been there for so long. So
Yeah.
that to be able to put them in a condition that they can do farm labor housing and meet the requirements that are not just grandfathered homes from, 1910 or whatever. So I just, that one thing about Joe Cerna, because I had read about that, I wish that was the case. I mean, I think it's great what these guys are doing, but this kind of streamlining would make it more effective, I guess.
I think that's a great idea, because then the farmer would also be regulating who's staying there already, right? And to work
We
on their
have
farm.
to-
And-
Yeah.
Yeah, you have
I
to
disagree.
work
You
your-
disagree?
Yeah, exactly.
Because somebody who has
Yeah.
opinions, I would love to not be a landlord. I think I'm not a good
Okay.
landlord.
Yeah.
I'm a farmer.
Well,
I have houses on, I know also why we're arguing about this.
It's not even on the agenda.
It's not-
Just discuss it.
I have lots of thoughts.
Discuss
But, yeah.
But it shows what a complicated issue this is and how some solutions work for some farmers that don't work for other farmers.
Absolutely.
We need a lot of options and, so anyways, I'll just say again, D3's office is spearheading this and, they need all the, insightful
District,
feedback.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So, Supervisor Muller's office and he, I think, it's exciting to have fresh energy in that office and he's got a lot of good intentions, but could definitely use the insight of people living it to really help. Like, like kind of like we were saying earlier with the Cloverdale Ranch thing, like if we can get some key recommendations in early to influence the design of the program, it's gonna have a lot of fixes later on down the
Well,
line.
I think it's an excellent discussion. I'm actually, because one thing I really like about you, Lauren, is you're good at discussing things and ideas and going back and forth. And I think it's great that we have this time to be able to talk about this because usually we don't. We have so
Yeah,
many
I think we
things.
want to have a lighter agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
And into the topics of the day.
Right.
But speaking of agenda, should we go back to we have two more left, the meeting minutes and the CDB report? And thank goodness someone else started doing minutes. Summer, if that was you, thank you. Because I'm lagging, I'm beyond lagging at this point.
So item number 5, consideration of meeting minutes for January 9th, 2023. And I think everyone had an opportunity to look at the.
They get to my packet because of the traffic. So I'll just list it.
Yeah, this was like the emergency
This
one.
is back in
This is
the middle of this.
The storms, exactly, the storms. Right before the shooting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second. Oh, I'm scanning it, I don't see anything. Okay, we ready for a roll call vote? James,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Peter,
Abstain.
and Ryan,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
and Lauren, and I vote yes. Okay. We passed minutes for the first time in like 6 months. All right, I think we're ready for Summer for the community development director's report.
Okay, sorry, 1 second, let me just. Okay, so for this month's community development director's report, pretty quick, there were no PAD permit applications that were heard by the Board of Supervisors or the Planning Commission during this past month. No PAD permit applications were received by the Planning Division during this past month. And there were 4 rural coastal development permit exemption applications that were submitted during this past month. And all of those have been approved, and those can be found on the attachment to the Community Development Director's report. And there was a road repair, carport, repair of a flood damaged building, and a deck addition. So just some minor work in rural areas that qualified for exemptions from a coastal development permit and no PAD permits. And just an additional announcement regarding the Ag Advisory Committee vacancies, that there are currently 4 vacancies, 2 farmer positions and 1 public member and 1 conservationist seat. And in the winter recruitments, there were 2 applications that were received, and the supervisor's office is going to be moving forward on those 2 applications. I believe they are for the 2 farmer positions. I don't have the applicants, any further applicant information. I don't know that those people have yet been contacted to move forward, but the supervisor's office will be intending to move forward on filling those 2 positions, and then we'll be also publishing probably this week recruitment for the other 2 seats. And it sounds like maybe potentially Lauren's position as well. We'll chat offline, Lauren, but so potentially back to 3 seats, but hopefully we'll have some new members, a few new members soon, not full, but a few new. And when the recruitment does come out, I'll send that around to everybody, and feel free to share it with anybody that you know may be interested or a good candidate. And we'll send it out to the Ag Advisory Committee subscription email list that we have of about 1,300 people that have signed up for that as well, to get the word out there. And that is it for the director's report. We do, sorry, one more thing. We do have, I think that there will be a couple of planning items for the July meeting. Just a heads up, and I know there have been a list of things in tonight's meeting to agendize. So I'll work with Chair Vars about the agenda for July, and making sure we can fit everything on there. Thanks.
Good news on the vacancies. It'll be nice to just have at least the farmer positions fleshed out, and more flexibility on having a quorum here before I transition out.
Good news. I was just reading something really fast. I don't know if it's the right time to bring one more thing up regarding the Joe Cerna thing.
Should we do it after the meeting maybe? And then we can chat all we want, or should it be?
Well, it's
Okay.
not necessarily a chat, it's just
Okay.
something that's important. It's regarding what we were discussing around Joe Cerna, is that it does, I looked it up because I've been reading about it previously, and it does say, and I think in some ways this is good, in some ways it's difficult, but it says under home ownership, under that particular grant, for rehabilitation or new home construction, lien restrictions are required for 20 years. If the unit is sold to a non-farm worker buyer before completing the 10th year, the full grant amount must be repaid under most circumstances. Between the 10th and 20th anniversary, the grant is forgiven at a rate of 10% per completed year. The grant is fully forgiven after completing 20 years. So it's difficult in the sense that if I'm reading it correctly or understanding it correctly, if the person is 20, if they're not a farmer after 20 years, then they still got a free, they can move on, and they got the free house or whatever, or the grant for the free house. But the other really, yeah, it's good. So anyway, but maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but under Joe Cerna, it's here, so if anyone wants to read it. Interesting, yeah.
Which one's the Cerna? Is the 555 or the 55 Kelly or the Stone?
Yeah, and this is basically, I've been reading that previously when I was doing certain research a while back. But I still have it on my phone. But if anyone wants to read it.
Make a motion to adjourn.
In a second.
We could just get to complain us adjourned.
With Peter's blessing, I adjourn this meeting.
When did they, the only thing I hear is are when.
Get your-
Yeah.
Get that, you get like some shit.
Oh, yeah, it's done. Which email they was sending to Amy Doors.
Okay, see.
Market and that's not.
No.
Is it, yeah, so it's Marathon? Sure,
Came to a meeting, everybody.
Not as.
So are you replacing?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
already.
You just feel.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too. Bye.